Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Mental Health Gaming Podcast. I'm Bradley. I'm once again joined by Stu.
Hello.
But no Ben as of yet due to technical difficulties, because that's the way things go these days. How are you doing, Stu?
I'm very good. How are you, Brad?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Getting on with things. Been looking forward to recording this since we've done the last one. Thanks to some great feedback from the people who did listen, which was the most surprising part, that people actually listened. Wasn't expecting that at all for episode 1.
Well, I did cajole a few people into listening as well with, mild threats of violence, nothing too heavy.
So yeah, as I said, we've not got Ben with us at the moment. We're having just a few technical difficulties with recording software and mics and what have you, but hopefully that will be sorted for the future ones. He is the ear candy after all. So we'll jump into it. Stu, been playing anything new?
Yeah, always got a ton of stuff on the go, and at the moment I'm really caning the Sega Ages release of Shinobi. So for those who don't know, and there probably won't be many listeners to this who don't, but it's an arcade game from 1987, and it's been re-released and developed for the Switch, probably other formats, but I'm playing it on Switch, by a developer called M2, and they do a lot of these re-releases, and they're on a sort of higher level than most of these kind of caretaker style studios that brush up and improve old games. What they tend to do is they give you the original in an untouched format, exactly as you remember. They also add all sorts of stuff like proper saving, save anywhere, pause anywhere, and they also normally put in different modes as well. So you can have things like extra lives, extra powers, and they also make sure that the leaderboards are separated if they have those sorts of options, so it doesn't confuse people between how those scores were achieved. And yeah, Shinobi is just a fantastic game. As fun today as it was back in the day. I used to play it whenever I saw a cabinet because I'm an old man, and basically, that was what I did back in the day. And I was never any good at it, but I'm caning it at the moment, and I am a hair's breadth away from a 1 credit completion on it now. The entire game can be done in about 20 minutes when you know what you're doing. So I've got most of the patterns memorized, although there's a lot of randomness in some of the enemy placement and appearance and where they spawn and when. But I kind of mitigate that by sort of spamming certain actions and also just being quite cautious. And yeah, right near the end, I got to the final boss and died after 3 of his forms, which was really annoying because he was on his final form and he took me out with a really quick, odd move I wasn't prepared for. Otherwise, yeah, that would have been a 1 credit completion, and my entire life could have just been done. Happy, okay, I'm ready to check out now because I've done what I've set out to achieve. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic game. If anyone's thinking of getting it, it's currently $5.99 on the UK Nintendo Store. Well worth it if you're into arcade action platformers. A good step back in time. I'm not nostalgic. I only play games that I still enjoy, not just because they remind me of a certain time. And I say it definitely holds up. It takes a little while to get used to the difficulty level, of course, but once you do, fun all the way through, great enjoyment, very cheap. So that's Shinobi Sega Ages label, $5.99 on the UK Nintendo Store.
Excellent. I think I've owned. And this is probably not good on my part. I think I've only ever played Shinobi on the Commodore 64. Which probably wasn't a very good port. But I remember that being probably the only time I've ever played Shinobi. I didn't play it on the arcades or the Mega Drive or anything like that. It's one of those games that just passed me by. I don't have no idea why. Because I remember enjoying it. I think when I was younger, like especially in my pre-teens, I wasn't as bothered by if a port was bad or anything like that because I had no frame of reference. So I enjoyed it, and I've just never sought it out since. So on the one that's released, is it an arcade perfect conversion, or is it based on the console version?
No, it's absolutely arcade perfect. I think all of M2's games are based on the original arcade ROMs. And I think, Shinobi came out at a time that meant it fell between two stools a little bit. So it was towards the end of the Master Systems. Well, not towards the end, but yeah, by the time it was getting released, it was midway through the Master Systems sort of heyday. When the Mega Drive came out, they didn't bother bringing it out on it. So it came out on a lot of home computers, and it came out on the PC Engine and the Master System, but it didn't come out as a port to the Mega Drive. They brought out Revenge of Shinobi.
Yeah.
So it never got like an arcade perfect home conversion. I'm sure there's probably been one since, but at the time it certainly passed a lot of people by because of that, I think. So yeah, nice to finally get it in this format, and means I'm not playing a dodgy ROM.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I might have to give that a go, especially at that price point. In saying that, though, at the same time, Sega have just announced we're getting a Western release of Puyo Puyo 2 as well, which has got me really excited. The Sega Ages stuff, they've been nailing it. Especially, you know, with the stuff on the Switch, it's just absolute great conversions of all their old classics. And it's good to know, sort of like from things like Shinobi through the Sonic series, now going into, I would say, Puyo Puyo being a niche title as well. They're getting all those through, so yeah, good to see.
Yeah.
I've been playing not much. I was taken by surprise. By surprise rather, with Willy Jetman on the PlayStation 4, which is a really interesting game. It's almost in the vein of Mega Man, but has you playing this little spaceman type fella called Willy. You go round, you need to collect garbage from a cargo ship that's crashed on a planet, and then story takes you into different places and stuff like that. But the gameplay is very, very influenced by Mega Man. You get your upgrades as you go along, and as the story unfolds, you get new abilities, and you get better powers to take on other different types of enemies. And there's a review going to be, well, by the time you listen to this, should be on the website. But I went in, it's one of those games I went into thinking this is going to be lower tier trash. Something that is just, I don't know, just jumping in, just trying to jump in on something, just trying to get a few sales. But I went into it, and I think I've just played for a good 2, 3, 4 hours pretty much instantly, and just really enjoyed it. There's some really good humor in there, from literal toilet humor to some very clever digs at the gaming industry. And yeah, just a game that I just wasn't expecting anything from. It's just really surprised me, and sort of one that I'm gonna play through to completion. So much so it actually stopped me playing Tetris for a few days. That's how good it is. And I think that's generally how I'm. That is generally going to be my score barometer. I might start doing review scores as to whether I stop playing Tetris for it or not. But yeah, no, really interesting. It's called, the full title is Willy Jetman and the Curse of something or other. If you bear with me 2 seconds, I can, because I tried doing this before and I completely messed up the title when I was telling someone else about it. Willy Jetman, Astromonkey's Revenge. It sounds like a trash title, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. No, it sounds like a Mickey take, a very deliberate one. A Jet Set Willy mash up with one of those budget $2.99 releases you used to get for your Specky back in the day.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, and that is honestly what I was expecting from it. But no, even from the start. Honestly, the opening intro movie, I was sitting there going, "This is gonna be god awful." It opens up with there's a monkey reading a paper on the toilet, and ship is about to be hit by an asteroid. It doesn't want to deal with it. The ship tries to take over, can't do it. Asteroid collides with ship, which starts to crash. And in the meantime, the monkey looks up from the paper and does a poo in the toilet. So, as I said, literal toilet humour.
Yeah, sophisticated.
And I was like, yeah, this is going to be absolute rubbish. As I say, then the gameplay started, and I was like, just enamored with it. And then it started making really clever digs. There was like one of the first little jokes in it is you go to, you get your weapon, you go a bit further on, and then you find a better weapon, and you can get the weapon for free. But then you have to buy ammo for it within the game using your built-up credits. And it makes a very sly little dig to modern AAA titles and the way that they piecemeal their games these days, that you buy a base game and then you get your microtransactions on top. And it was just like that, from the toilet humour joke at the start to what that is, it's quite a tonal shift in terms of the humour. And it was like really well done. And then it's there's some little nods to the likes of Dragon Ball Z in there and things like that as well. And it's just, it takes a few turns, and it's not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not going to go down that line with it. Enemies are repetitive. There's not enough variation there at times, but it's just a good, fun game. If you do get a chance, it's definitely worth picking out. And I think it's on Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. So it's there for whatever console you'd prefer to get it on.
Cool. So the Switch version is 29.99 and the PC one's 50p then, yeah?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's about £13,
Right.
which might be expensive for some, but £13 for a game that is fun, I don't begrudge that. And I don't want to say, just wait for it for a sale, because it is a good game. But for a lot of people to take a risk, it'll be when it inevitably hits some kind of sale down the line.
Yeah, I mean, prices of games is a good conversation to have, to be honest. I think we'll have to cover it at some point because I'm playing, as of only last night, Project Cars 2 on the PC. And it's just a phenomenal game. I was like, okay, downloaded it, 50 gig, took most of the evening. So I got to it at about it was about 11 o'clock last night, which is really late for me. Sat down to play it. I was on it till 2 o'clock in the morning. It was just crazy. And that game was, you can get it for on Humble Bundle for like 11 quid. And it's just crazy the level of detail and development that's gone into it. And, you know, just how much quality there is built in. And it's dropped to what you'd think of as just beer money, really, over a course of a couple of years. And it's just amazing how if you compare that to like the likes of Shinobi, which I got on the Master System back in the day for, I think it was 29.99, which in today's money is at least sort of 45, 50 quid, and that's doable in half an hour. And just the value proposition in stuff and the likes of Game Pass is just insane.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely a conversation that I think needs to be had, and definitely something we should cover because, again, to go to the mental health side of things, it's perceived value versus fear of missing out. It really affects the way you think about things and the decisions you try to make. So what we'll do, we'll move this on, obviously, from the gaming side of stuff now to the mental health chat. It kind of comes on from sort of that in terms of making decisions. And it's something that hit me the other day in terms of decision making for everyday things. It's for a lot of people, making a decision as to shall I go and do this thing or should I do this thing comes very easy. It's just, it doesn't matter. It's shall I do A, shall I do B? But for me, when it comes to shall I do A, shall I do B, I get to a point sometimes where I do neither because I spend so long internally debating the rights of wrongs of A and B. You know, what happens if I say no to this person because I want to do A? Are they going to get upset with me? Are they going to have a negative feeling about me? Are they going to potentially hate me? But if I do B, and then they're always going to expect me to want to do that, and I'm not going to be able to do the thing I want to do. And spend just ages with inner monologues and inner voices debating these two very simple things, and it's a really weird situation to be in. I think, and I can see the how preposterous it is as well at times, and it can be as simple as I want to stay home and because I want to watch the football, for example, but someone wants to go and do this other thing. It doesn't need both of us there to do it, but should I be doing that, or do I want to stay home this one time and watch this? And if I stay home and do this, what's going to be the outcome because I didn't do the other thing? It's to have that constantly in your head is very, very difficult. And I don't know if I'm the only one that feels like that, or if that's something that everyone goes through, or is it just a mental health thing?
Well, the answer I think is probably both. So there's obviously the choices that we have to make as adults, which I never like doing. I much prefer to behave internally as if I'm still a kid. But when you're making adult decisions, obviously you're weighing up consequences and you're trying to balance responsibility against fun, you know, and your own positive mental health and relaxation. And should I be doing something constructive or should I be doing something that's entirely play in inverted commas? And all that, you know, just that feels like normal stuff on a day-to-day basis. But sometimes anxiety can leak in, I think, for some people. I think to a greater and lesser extent for absolutely everyone. So it becomes, it's more difficult sometimes to trust your decision making. And a lot of the time I find that having people around me I trust, who I can talk to, will help me, you know, guide me basically. It will balance me out. It will give me a good way of calibrating my thoughts so that I'm not acting too impulsively or egotistically, or going the other, to the other extreme and just being too reluctant and holding back. So calibrating against other people really helps for me, but obviously not everybody's in that situation. Not everyone is lucky enough to have that level of input and help around them. And I think in my experience, the people that I've listened to as a somebody who listens to people in a mental health capacity, loneliness and isolation can cause a lot of trouble when it comes to trying to calibrate your feelings, whether you should be spending enough time on something or too much time, and trusting your own reaction to it. And it can be a really difficult thing, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, we're gonna try something because I think we've got Ben back. Are you there, Ben?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear
Yes,
me?
he's working. We fixed the
Ah,
technical issues.
I got my hammer out and just started hitting everything, and it seemed to fix everything perfectly.
Best
That's
best
that's
idea, best way.
that's good.
I'm getting worried. The older I get, the worse I get with technology. I'm turning into my mum, just getting flustered, and I think in the end I'm just gonna kind of pick my laptop up and just throw it on the floor and run away screaming.
Well, as long as you're not wearing a dress as yet, then I think you're okay.
Only on Sundays.
One day your grandkids are going to be turning around and going, "You still carry a computer around with you, Papa?"
Yeah, it'll be embedded in our brains.
Yeah. You're still trying to work out how to program the VHS, and you're still like, "I've never
Yeah.
used the
So
VHS. Why am I trying to program a VHS?"
why don't any of you grandkids use Betamax?
Yeah,
Yeah.
these phonograms far too technical for me.
Actually, we'll get back on point in a minute, but just to point out, our generation is almost the oddest generation because we've lived through the older technologies that we mock our parents and that for not being able to understand, but are now getting to the point where we're going to stop understanding the technologies that our kids and stuff like that are really getting hold of. And it's kind of we've been there through the growth, and are now going to be sort of almost confused at what that's turned into. It's a really weird thing.
Yeah, I find if you don't keep your finger on the pulse with it, you can get left behind so quickly. Like I occasionally read, tech magazines or whatever, and you look at like, oh, the hottest new apps. Yeah, most like year on year, it's just an increasing amount of what the hell is that? What does that do? Why do we need that?
And tech magazines that go, paper's still relevant.
Yeah, I say magazines. Yeah, online.
If
Seen
my
it.
if my stuff doesn't come on papyrus, that's it.
Yeah.
But anyway, obviously, I'm assuming you've been listening for the past bit anyway, Ben. So, what's your thoughts on that inner monologuing and debating yourself over minor decisions?
That's something I've gone over a lot in the last year. So I go into my full story another time. But after my redundancy, I made some time for myself. I was recommended a very good life coach or counselor, depending on your preference. And she gave me a really great bit of advice in our sessions. And when you're struggling or, struggling with your inner voice, it's a better way to approach it is to speak to yourself the way you would encourage a friend when they were struggling or if they are struggling. And I think from that perspective, it becomes very easy to change that inner dialogue. Yeah, having that little shift of like, yeah, actually, if my friend came to me with the same problem that I was having or the same doubts, how big, how small, it doesn't really matter. But if they were coming to me, I would be quite positive towards them. I wouldn't be there going, oh, you can't do that. That's stupid. Why are you trying to do that? Or what's
Mm.
the point of that? You'd be a lot more positive. And I think it's something, it's very easy to lose sight of that. But how we actually talk to ourselves, considering we spend so much time in our own heads, is actually quite alarming. The sort of the negative inner voice or inner dialogue we can have with ourselves. I don't always get it right. I've been going for job interviews recently, and I've had to kind of give myself those pep talks of like, I wake up and go, oh my god, I got the interview. I'm really sort of doubting myself, but
Mm.
actually take a step back and go, no, you can do this. You've got the experience. Read your CV. You've got this, you've done this role or you've done similar roles before. So, and that can be even on a small thing. Like the other day, going to the gym, I was like, oh, I don't really want to go to the gym, but like, oh no, you'll feel better. It's going to be good for you. And I know that sounds a bit airy fairy, but yeah, I think we can really overlook just how impactful our inner dialogue can be. And I think you say that simple advice I was given of just speak to yourself the way you would a friend, I think that can have a really empowering effect for people.
Yeah.
Do you find as well that that's where you become a massive hypocrite as well? I don't mean that aimed at you, Ben, but in general, because it's a thing I say to myself. I can quite happily dish out advice to other people on a logical basis when they're going, "Oh no, this is gone, and I don't know whether to do this." And this, you go, "Well, what makes you happy? Do that. As long as it's not going to drastically, if you being happy isn't going to hurt somebody drastically, then do what makes you happy." You can say that with utmost confidence to someone, but
Yeah,
you turn that on
absolutely.
yourself, and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh no, what am I going to do? 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 What am I going to do?" And you just repeat it in your head's going. And so then you're going, "But I've just said this to so and so. I am such a hypocrite. I'm a bad person. I'm this. I'm that." And it's just a vicious cycle going around constantly.
I agree to a point. I think if you catch yourself doing that, it's quite easy to change that default and just offer yourself encouragement. And okay, yeah, I've sat around, I've not really done anything this evening. I played a few video games, but in this instance, now you can sort of say, yeah, well, but I could speak about them on the podcast or on whichever forum I'm using, or it can be a conversation starter that could open doors to in other social settings. Maybe that's reaching a little bit, but
No, that's a really good point, Ben. I think, obviously we have our reactions, which are very often, immediate and have a physical side to them. And, we can immediately feel flushed with adrenaline or frightened, anxious, or excited. And we're not always contemplative of why that's happened. So we go, oh, well, I'm feeling a certain way. I need to act on that, or I need to remove that feeling. And these decisions are often made really quickly. And sometimes when we, like you said, you query yourself on them in a sort of gentle way, like you say, like you would with a friend that you would advise, it's often a really good way of getting to whether that was a positive or a negative reaction for yourself. And understanding both is a positive. So understanding when you're feeling a negative emotion when perhaps you shouldn't or you don't need to, in inverted commas, because these things are subjective. But understanding when that reaction is normal rather than abnormal is something that I think, like you said, is within your grasp if you are given the right tools by somebody. And it's a really good thing to do, to non-judgmentally review how you feel about something and
yeah, and
just validate it that way. Yeah.
I think that's the crucial thing that you've picked up on there. So, like, non-judgmental and conquering that fear of negative emotions. Like, I used to think, why am I happy? I need to be happy 24/7. But in all honesty, if you were happy 24/7, you would just be so drained after probably less than 24 hours. And that idea that we shouldn't have negative emotions, I think, is such a misunderstanding of mental health. Those emotions exist for a reason. You think of emotions as energy. Sometimes you're flat and you need to have that little bit of a step back and understand why. It's like, it's okay, that phrase, it's okay to not be okay, but we shouldn't have a fear of negative emotions, but it's then how we process them and deal with them and say, yeah, I'm feeling a bit flat today, but why? Is it because I didn't get enough sleep? Is it because I didn't exercise? I didn't eat properly? Is it because someone's pissed me off? And if you actually take some time to step back, like you said, non-judgmentally analyze and think about those things, you can actually quickly dissipate that feeling. And sometimes you might come to the conclusion that, yeah, I'm frustrated with this certain thing, but I can resolve it. Or maybe I'm just a bit flat today and I just need the time to myself to make peace, whether that takes half an hour, 2 hours, whatever. But yeah, I think getting over the fear of negative emotions is one thing, but then dealing with them in a positive way, that's crucial to building a pretty much a more robust mental outlook.
As you've recently been through a situation where you've gained some control there, Ben, what would you give as advice based on your experience as a first step for somebody who's really struggling in this area?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think, I'd repeat myself a lot. I'm sure people will get annoyed by that as we go through these episodes. But I would say that advice that I was given of how you speak to yourself, try and speak to yourself like you would a friend. That was really eye-opening for me and quite enlightening. Of like, yeah, actually, I really do criticize myself needlessly and over stupid things as well. Like I'm naturally anxious person, but when I actually took a step back and non-judgmentally listened to my own inner dialogue, I was like, God, no wonder I'm feeling anxious or worried or, stressing about things, because I'm not giving myself a chance to actually, perform as I know, like deep down know I can. So yeah, that would be my first piece of advice I could give to anyone who's really struggling, with themselves in this particular situation, is to imagine it was a friend or a close family member, someone that you love and trust, and have encouragement for. Speak to yourself the way you'd speak to them, and I think you can very quickly change your inner dialogue, and then that obviously affects your outer behaviors.
Yeah, great
One thing
advice.
I suppose we're going to need to clarify with stuff like this is just to point out that none of us are professionals and they are just our own opinions.
Oh,
As well.
absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Just in case someone listens and goes, "Oh, I'll try that," and then wants to make a complaint at us, it's all just our own opinions based on our own issues and beliefs and things like that. I don't know whether we need to add a caveat with any of that at any point, but I thought I'll put that in early before.
No, I think that's a very good point, and I think
So
Yeah.
to imagine someone coming back and went, Ben said to do it like this, and now my girlfriend's left me. I haven't got a job, and all I do is sit down in my pants all day playing PlayStation. What's gone wrong?
Well, I think of all of our listeners as friends, and I'm just encouraging them the way I would encourage my own friends.
To be fair,
Are
at
you-
this point, most of our listeners probably are our friends.
yeah, good point.
But no, I agree with you, Ben. And again, but it's the weird thing is I'm listening to it and I'm nodding along as you're saying it. But it's the weirdest thing comes then from, I guarantee you, later on today or whether it's tomorrow, even though you said that, and I believe you, and that's how I believe you should approach it as well. I'm going to have a situation where I'm just going to end up sitting, head in my hands, going, I don't know if to do this, I don't know if to do that, should I do that, should I do this, should I do this? But if I do that, that person's going to be really pissed off with me. But this person will be okay with me. But I've let that person, and I'll be sitting there going, but Ben said, I remember when Ben said that, and I agree with him because I think that as well. But no, and it's just going to go. It's just going to spiral again. And I think that's the thing people don't get with mental health sometimes, like when they come from the outside looking in, is that we are all, anyone who has issues with mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether they've got ADHD, autism, no matter what part of it there is, we all fully understand how it should be done. We get it. We know, well, yeah, of course, this is the logical way of doing things. This is the way it should be done, but we can't. Not sometimes we can. Sometimes we can get it all together and we can follow that advice and we can get through a day, a week, a month, hell, even a year. Then something happens, but something major, something minor, and it all starts to spiral again. You go back into old habits and things like that. And it's one of the reasons I think as well, it's important to have these conversations, both the advice that we can give out that we know is right and that we followed ourselves, whether it's been successful or not, but also understanding that, look, none of this is a definitive answer. What I say, that I have these spirally moments might not apply to someone else. What Ben says might be right for 7 people out of 10, but for those other 3 people, it's not at the same time. And I think this is why the conversations we have now, and again, one of the reasons for wanting to do this podcast is that the talking about it isn't just a 5-minute thing of, hey, yeah, these are the problems and here's the solutions, because that's not it. It is, I mean, some of these are going to go extremely rambly over the week because one of us, or whether it's another guest we have in, could be recording that day and have some serious things going through their head and may just ramble. and that's okay. But yeah, but the stuff you say, Ben, it is really good, and it's something I need to try and do more of. Because and again, you can tell me if you guys feel different about yourselves, but the respect I have for other people, I don't have for myself, which means the advice that I give other people still, and I know I should give myself and talk to myself like a friend rather than myself, doesn't stick because of the times when I'm in my worst state. I just don't respect myself.
Yeah, that comes back to the feeling that there isn't a one size fits all approach to mental health. You know, I I believe what I say, like in terms of, you can speak to yourself the way you would a friend, but I totally get what you're saying. And, I'm not going to stand here and go, I do it perfectly all the time. Like tomorrow morning, I'm doing a 5K race. Now I've run marathons, I've done half marathons, I've done 10Ks, 5Ks, whatever. I've done hundreds of training runs, thousands of training runs, but I will still go to that start line with a bit of self-doubt. But I think it's having, first of all, having an awareness, and then it's having the discipline to recognize an issue. Now, obviously, inner dialogue is just but one factor in mental health. But I think, yeah, I think it's interesting when you say about having respect for yourself, because that's a huge issue for me. Like my self-esteem is, it's low enough that it could parachute out of a snake's ass sometimes. But
yeah,
I think
that's a phrase, by the way.
But that self-esteem, it's something I've built up over time. And I think, again, it's recognizing or having that self-awareness and having that discipline to recognize the problem and actually tackle it. One of the things that I was diagnosed with clinical depression in 2015. Again, that is something I would like to talk about another time, just the process, etc. But at that point, I was really struggling, and it took a long time to get out of that rut, over a year. But then I came to the kind of the conclusion with myself is like, I can tell people I've been clinically depressed, but I don't want to be defined by that. And, I've had ups and downs since then. And it's like, okay, at least now I've got the tools. I've recognized it, coached myself through it, but also used some other things that we can talk about another time. But yeah, I think it is having that discipline to, take responsibility for it. And yeah, we all have days when we feel bad, and there still are days when I really do struggle, and I'd lose sight of that responsibility. But I think, it's almost like a stick in a river. You just have to, or a log in a river rather, you just have to try and grab onto it. Sometimes you will get carried away, but sometimes you'll actually, get some stability, take a little step up from, the rut that you're feeling that you're in.
No, I totally agree with that. And it's again with the inner dialogue thing going on. When I had that talking about that last little bit and responding to what you said before, I'm literally about 10 seconds into it. My inner dialogue is going, you need to shut up now because you're shitting on everything Ben's just said. You sound like you're taking everything he's just said and throwing it out the window. You need to shut up now. No, you're still talking. Stop saying what you're saying. You're going to offend him. But that's going on as well. And it's so hard to sort of like really focus on yourself because you've got those voices going on, and they're not. I think the way that's always been portrayed in popular culture, in TV and film and stuff like that, is those inner voices are shown as, what is it, like the devil and an angel or whatever, a demon and an angel on your shoulder. And it's not like that. They're not black and white. It's those voices are just pure grey. If you want, they're not black and white. They are just grey, and they're just in there, and they're just little self nuggets of doubt and stuff like that. And I'm fairly sure, and you can clarify it if you want, that I wasn't shitting on everything you just said.
Oh yeah, I'm completely offended. This is my last podcast. No, not at all. Not at all.
I'm fairly sure I was just rebutting. But then you go, but there's those little inner voices that are just going at you constantly. And I'm going, like, that's it now. Stop. Please say something else, though. I don't. And it's just really weird. It's a really weird thing to have to go through daily.
I think, though, that the fact that both you guys have shared those experiences shows the value of having this conversation. Like, it shows it immediately. However you both individually feel afterwards, once you've shared, whether it's drained or enervated or whatever, just the fact that you're able to do it will impact other people positively, because they can go, yeah, I have those experiences. I feel that way sometimes. It's a great way of sort of normalizing these emotions, which, as we've said right at the top of the podcast, it's something that is not talked about enough in standard everyday life. And so just to sort of go back onto the sort of, we're not professionals kind of thing. The only sort of claim to any kind of background I have in this is, so I've spent 6 years as a Samaritans listening volunteer, and I'm an accredited mental health first aider, and I've also got a mental health advocacy diploma as well. So it's something that's really important in my life. And from my experience, listening to people, active listening, which I think, again, we'll cover on a separate podcast. It's a really good topic. But actively listening to people and letting them just express themselves is such a good way of normalizing and becoming familiar with how you feel and how others feel. So I think it's really great, this conversation. It's good for me, good for you guys, hopefully, as well.
The more we share, the more we talk about these things, the more we normalize them. And they should be normal. Human emotion is, that's one of the biggest factors in all of our lives. And, bottling everything up and secreting yourself away from conversations because you've got self-doubt or worries, it's hard sometimes. Putting yourself out there is really difficult. Hopefully people listening will, I'm sure some of them will go, oh, Ben, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I'm not going to talk to myself like I would a friend. I'd talk to myself however I damn well please. But hopefully there'll be someone that will actually get that little light bulb effect from anything that we're saying of like, actually, I've been feeling this certain way. And, what you guys are saying, that helped me through, or that gave me a little starting point. I agree. No advice is going to be perfect or universal, but just to agree to your point, Stu, like having the conversation is a huge starting point for people, and whether they're involved with that or just listening, I think that can make a big difference to people.
It is. And what's really interesting is the way, I don't think it even needs to be your specific area that you have an issue with at times. There was a video I watched going back a couple of weeks now, by a guy called Joe Tracini. He's got to be a public figure of some sort because he's got a blue tick next to his name on Twitter, but I couldn't tell you where it was from, unfortunately, who he is. But he put a video up, talks about he's dealing with borderline personality disorder, and the way he'll do something, but something in the back of his head saying this to be different and contradictory all the time, and so on and so forth. And he puts together a really good video that it's funny and it's charming, but it just nails the borderline personality disorder
superb.
really well. Now, I don't think I've got borderline personality disorder. I'm 90% sure that I don't, but the way he covers that speaks volumes, I think, to other areas of mental health as well, and what you have when you have those moments of self-doubt or depression really hits home. There are elements of what he says in that video that come to the fore with that. So with the discussions we have and around what we've just spoke about, it's not a pigeonhole. This will deal with depression and this bit will be for anxiety. This will be for people with ADHD. It's going to be, I think, whether you, even if you haven't got any mental health issues, I'm a big believer I don't think there's a single person out there that doesn't have some kind of mental health issue. It's just how it's manifested. But even if you feel you're someone who doesn't suffer with anything from mental health, the coping mechanisms of each individual can have a relevance on how you deal with things. Whether it's been labelled as that for you does not matter. But I said I will link to the video on the tweet in the description wherever you see it. But it is really worth watching because, again, it's someone I don't believe is a professional. I don't believe that's why he's got his blue tick next to his name or anything like that. I'm guessing he's an actor or something like that, or a comedian. He talks about things openly and honestly, and it led. When I watched it, it stuck with me in such a positive way. But he never set out to say, "Hey, Brad, this is for you." And I think what we need to do is, again, like, I'll take on board, and I will definitely take on board the stuff Ben's been talking about, Dane, his coping mechanisms, and I will try and put some of that into practice over the course of a weekend. It may work, it may not, but that's one of those things. I'm just glad now that the conversation, I'm not saying that we started it, but the conversation is happening. And I was influenced to get mental health gaming going because of other people starting the conversation. And if other people then join the conversation because of this, then I know we've done something great and something right. But yeah, it's interesting to the way. I think each week we'll have something different, hopefully, to speak about, but we may even just repeat the stuff we've just done next week or in a couple of weeks' time, because you just don't know how it's going to come, but the conversation is there.
Yeah, and I think it's hugely important to keep that conversation going. There's been a massive cultural shift, in terms of how people feel about mental health, but people actually now aren't as afraid or aren't as timid about speaking up in one respect, but there's also hundreds of thousands, millions of people that perhaps aren't quite in that situation or don't have that outlet. So yeah, we're not going to be able to reach them all, but if we reach 1, 2, 10 people and can make their lives a bit better, or give them the encouragement to join the conversation, whether it's tweeting at us or just listening to the conversation, I think that's massively important. And I'm not arrogant enough to stand here and go, what I'm saying is absolutely right, because again, there's no one size fits all approach. And mental health, thoughts, feelings, they're almost like a washing machine inside the head. It's just everything's overlapping and tumbling over each other. There's no one thread that you can latch onto and solve someone's self-doubt or self-esteem or with one magic word. But as long as you keep that conversation going and keep that dialogue going, you can reach people and encourage them to have a little bit of respect for themselves and actually give them that little platform to go, actually, yeah, I am worthy of improving my own mental health. I am worthy, and I do have a reason to share. I've got things I can share with people, and I can join in with things. We don't, what we say, we don't know exactly what's going to, ring true with people, but as long as we keep having the conversations, that's vital.
Yeah, and the last bit I'll cover on this before we start to wrap up. And as I said, I always like to finish on something non-related, so it's nicely sandwiched. Future podcasts will definitely have the discussion around the supposed idea that as a human race we are more open to mental health now, and it's not as a taboo a subject, and why I don't think that's always necessarily the case. It has improved, but there's still a long way to go. But yeah, there's definitely discussions to be had there, and also along the lines of, I used to be obsessed when I've done other podcasts and written in the past. If I wasn't seeing numbers into the thousands for listenership or the amount of readers we had and things like that, that bothered me. It bothered me a lot. It's like, why aren't I as popular? Why aren't I reaching people? Whereas I think with this, as long as I'm hearing or seeing that one person has listened to it, and it's that knowing that maybe we're getting to that one person in a positive way and stopping them doing something stupid, or we're helping them in any way, shape, or form, and I don't care how it would be helping them, then it's something I want to carry on doing. The obsession with numbers is something I'm trying to get over personally.
Yeah.
And again, it's all future discussion that the things, again, the comparing ourselves to people all the time, or being afraid to speak to certain people. It's all stuff we will discuss on a future podcast. But again, the conversation is opening up, and I'm hoping we're doing our bit for that.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, and we will talk about that more in depth at another time. Social media can have such a huge impact on how we consume that and how we digest, what we look at on a daily basis. We probably half the time don't realize, that's something else I did in my counseling sessions, about actually look at who are you following? Like, are they relevant to you, or are they kind of disrupting, your mental progress? And it was, I went through and I've actually removed a few things that I was following, because actually when I look at them, actually analyze them, it's like, well, yeah, if I'm seeing that, no wonder I'm having, a negative thought, or following a unhealthy kind of lifestyle. So I think, social media, that's a much bigger conversation. But I think it's interesting when you hear like Instagram are removing, or I think they did a trial where they're removing likes, public likes from posts. So I think you can see how many you've got yourself, but you can't see how many other people have got, and perhaps steer people a little bit away from that comparison of, popularity and numbers. It's essentially, it's all meaningless. It doesn't matter. You be you, like you said earlier, as long as you're not hurting someone, you're not doing anything that's overtly offensive. You be you, and the more we can encourage people to do that, without the need for likes and ticks and retweets, whatever. Yeah, that's another really interesting conversation to go into for another time.
There you go. So we've got at least 2 more shows to go. As I said, I like to finish on something that's not particularly mental health related. Usually it would be a case of we'd go maybe in depth into a particular game that's relevant at the time. But seeing as he was missing from the first part of the show due to technical issues, we're going to just finish with Ben and ask Ben what he's been playing.
So, since we last spoke, I've got a little selection of titles. After enjoying Injustice 2, I have picked up Mortal Kombat 11. Last episode, Brad, you spoke about games nailing their colours to a mast. Obviously, for Not Tonight, that was in a far, far more political context.
Yeah.
But with Mortal Kombat 11, the adherence that they have to that hyper-violence, you talk about, it's not just nailed onto the mast, it's drilled in there with a severed limb, dripping in blood. It's so OTT to the point it's ludicrous, but it's such a enjoyably stupid escapist game to play. I've also been dipping into Don't Die Mr. Robot, which
yes,
is the perfect just one more type game.
Yeah, great game.
I pick it up for 10-15 minutes, or an hour's gone. It's such a beautifully balanced game. Gets quite fiendishly difficult towards the end. I've still got a couple of the remix modes to finish off.
I forget how long that's actually been out now. Back when it first released for the Vita, I interviewed one of the developers about the time of its release, and it was a really good conversation we had. And he was talking about games development, and I was just totally enamored with the game. It looks, I think I said it to him at the time. I said it looks crap. And the initial release did, they've spruced up the graphics a little bit. And I said, but it's got everything you need.
Yeah.
And I think I said to him, I likened it at the time to Thomas Was Alone. And I said, like, that was really clever in the way it told stories, just using like basic shapes and the different personalities that came from these basic shapes. I said, you've got everything you need. You've got a crudely drawn square graphic with eyes. You've got fruit. And you've got enemies, and you know what you've got to do. It is deadly simple, but it's I the initial release of that, I spent hours upon hours playing. So I'm glad more people are playing it, because he deserves every sale he gets for that game.
Even the titles, what's that going to be? And like you say, you first load it up, you're like, oh, what is this? But I think within 5 minutes of playing it, it's just such a simple game. It's so enjoyable not because of its simplicity, but just because everything about it works. The mechanics around it are just all beautifully balanced. The levels in the remix mode, you play for 30 seconds to a minute, maybe longer if you're quite good at the game, but most of them don't require much of your time. But they're also, it's one of those games where I think you play, and when you make a mistake, you realize it was your mistake. It's not because the game's unfair, or because, that piece of fruit was well out of my reach. It's because I wasn't looking at the wriggling snake that was coming towards me, or I took my eye off something else on the other side of the screen. So
it tempts you to try and be, you get cocky in that game.
Yeah, totally.
It's brilliant that you set the game, I've got this, I've got bugger.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, can you skim over what the gameplay entails?
It's the best way of describing it is the pacifist mode from Geometry Wars.
Yes, yeah.
That is what's the closest thing. If you played Geometry Wars and you play pacifist mode, it's the closest thing to that, except you're not going through gates to destroy enemies, it's collecting fruit. You can pick it up on the Switch now for pennies.
And actually, I think the Switch version they've improved, because there's one probably the only grievance I have is the controls on the PlayStation are a little bit oversensitive. Like, I think the Switch has refined so you can do slightly more precise controls, which can actually, make a difference when you're trying to get your 26th strawberry.
But yeah, buy it. If you've anyone who hasn't played it, yeah, get it. It is honestly, it is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I'd wholeheartedly recommend it. It's a wonderful little game.
Excellent. Right, so before we drag on any further, because I'm sure we could go on with some more, unless either of you have anything major you want to add.
No, I was just going to say very quickly, Titanfall 2 is an absolute joy. Oh, it's obviously not a new game, but for me, it's riding a roller coaster with your arms in the air. It's chocolate brownies with extra fudge sauce. It's bank holiday, bathed in warm sunshine. It's complete joy.
I mean, I'll tell you what, I've got loads I can say that. We'll discuss that one next week, because yeah, it is a fantastic game. Stu, anything to add before we finish?
Some of the others on my radar, mostly VR stuff. I'll talk about it a bit more next week, but I can heartily recommend Red Matter, which is a exploration/puzzle game in first-person view, available for PSVR and also on PC. So if you get a chance, check that out. Red Matter. It's fairly cheap. Check it out.
Excellent. So yeah, that's been it for episode 2. Technical difficulties and all. As always, and I'll work out a decent outro at some point, but like, subscribe, share, whatever you need to do via various platforms. You can find us now, as of now, definitely on Spotify as well. We're on SoundCloud, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, possibly iTunes as well, Google Podcasts, all of those places. If there are anywhere that we're not, that you want us to be, let us know via our Twitter. But yeah, aside from that, I've been joined by Ben and Stu. I've been Bradley. Goodbye.
Cheerio.
See ya.